This video is sponsored by Tokyo Treat and Sakura Co., the monthly Japanese snack subscription boxes, but more on them later. Hi, my name's John, and for those of you who aren't familiar, I have my master's degree in clinical mental health counseling, and a while back, I posted this poll on the community tab on the YouTube channel, trying to figure out what psychology of for a persona character you wanted to see next, and Zenkichi absolutely ran away with the results, and so while it's been a long time coming, I'm so excited to finally talk about the Psychology of Zenkichi Hasegawa. So, if you like this kind of content, you want to see more of it coming from the channel, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and why even ringing that notification bell so you never miss another upload. But with all that out of the way, let's just jump into the video. Now, before we can really dive into who Zenkichi is when he meets the Phantom Thieves, we, as always, need to look at what happened in the past that helped to shape him into the man he is at the beginning of Persona 5 Strikers. As a young man, Zenkichi Hasegawa married the love of his life, Aoi, and eventually the two of them gave birth to a daughter named Akane. They ended up settling down in Tokyo, however, because Zenkichi was a member of law enforcement, he was often away from home, leading to his wife becoming the primary caretaker of Akane. And honestly, they seemed to live a pretty quiet and happy life. That is, until about 2 years prior to the events of Persona 5 Strikers. In true Persona 5 fashion, it's here that Aoi is hit and killed by a car driven by a drunk Jun Owada, a corrupt politician who at the time of the incident was under the thumb of everyone's favorite scumbag, Masayoshi Shido. And this would have been a tragedy in and of itself had Aoi just died alone. But what makes it worse is that Akane saw everything. But even though she saw the event with her own eyes, the blame for the incident was ultimately placed on Owada's secretary, who committed suicide, leaving a note that took full responsibility for the crime. But since Akane knew this was a lie, in her eyes, it was now ultimately up to Zenkichi to uncover the truth and catch her mother's killer, and initially, he was ready to bring the man who killed his wife to justice. But before we go any further into that, I think we need to revisit the concept of grief styles, because the loss of Aoi has a profound effect on both Zenkichi and Akane and their relationship moving forward. And this is a topic that we have admittedly talked a lot about on this channel because grief is something of a staple in the Persona franchise, and something that almost all of us will feel at some point in our lives. This means that to truly understand where Zenkichi's head is in the story, we need to understand how he managed this grief when he faced the death of his wife. Now, grief is often defined as the anguish experienced after significant loss, usually the death of a beloved person. And so, with this definition in mind, we need to look at how Zenkichi in this particular situation copes with that grief. Now, to keep it simple, there are 3 core grief styles that have been proposed by Drs. Terry Martin and Kenneth Doka that operate along a continuum, with these styles being instrumental grief, or people who want to experience their grief more intellectually or physically. In essence, the individual will want to have control over their emotions, and they'll focus more on trying to solve problems and complete tasks to cope with their grief. The second style, on the opposite side of the continuum, is intuitive grief, which is characterized by a heightened experience and expression of emotion and a desire to talk about the loss. And the third is a blended grief style, where the individual displays both intuitive and instrumental attributes. So, when looking at Zenkichi, I think he skews much more towards the instrumental side of the spectrum after the loss of Aoi. And so when Zenkichi heard about this tragedy in their family from Akane, this led him to begin his own investigation into what really happened that day, because he knew that Akane wouldn't lie about this. So I think it's safe to say that his desire to avenge his wife was at least in part to cope with his own grief and find a solution to not only avenge her death and bring the man who killed her to justice, but also to find some solace within himself so that this atrocious individual doesn't have the opportunity to hurt his family any further, but anyone else in the process. And if he, a member of the Public Security Intelligence Agency and the Kyoto Kyoto Prefectural Police was not able to bring to light the truth of this situation, then no one else would. Essentially, Zenkichi is trying to take action in order to move towards closure for his family. And this is his attempt to cope with his loss instrumentally. But unfortunately, we know that this doesn't actually end up working. Anytime Zenkichi would pick up a lead, the evidence would be destroyed by Owada's men. And when it was apparent that Zenkichi would not let this case go, Owada did what any innocent man would do, and he sent a threat against Akane's life if Zenkichi didn't stop his investigation. So, of course, Zenkichi left the investigation dead in his tracks so that he wouldn't lose the only member of his family that he had left, Akane, because he knew that if anything happened to her, he would never be able to forgive himself. While this may have ultimately protected her life, we learn later in the game that because he never actually tells her the circumstances surrounding why he couldn't get the evidence to convict Owada, this created an immense rift between Zenkichi and his daughter. But before we can dive into his relationship with Akane, we really need to consider who he is as a police officer and how this role in his life affects who he is as a person. When the Phantom Thieves meet Zenkichi for the very first time, let's be honest, he is not here to be making friends with them. I mean, sure, he saves them from a drunk man who's harassing them as they head back to Leblon, but he is ready to twist their arm to serve his needs and the police force's needs. He points out that after the talk show host suddenly proposed to Alice Hiragi on live television without any indication of even knowing who she was weeks prior to her appearance on the show, in the police force's eyes, this sudden change appears similar to the Phantom Thieves' changes of heart, and this prompts Zenkichi offer a deal to the Phantom Thieves, which would prevent them from being arrested, and in return, they will help him to find the one who's actually been changing the public's hearts. And this is just the beginning of their professional relationship, and it starts putting things in motion so that the Phantom Thieves will help him to solve the cases that he needs solved. And over the course of the story, we're able to get more context into the worldview of Zenkichi. And one instance that I specifically want to highlight is during the Mariko Hyodo arc of the game. And it's this moment in particular that really stood out to me.
My take is you kids are naive.
What do you mean?
It's clear that Mariko Hyodo was cornered by a pair of rotten scumbags. Tragic, I agree. But what is she doing in response? Isn't it just as wrong to change people's hearts and manipulate them?
That may be true, but...
Furthermore, that accident was her responsibility, being that she's the top of command. Regardless of who did what, a real leader takes the fall.
But even so...
It may be a bitter pill to swallow, especially for a group of justice-loving kids operating outside the law, but the real world isn't so cut and dry. And the longer you keep up this hero charade, the harder it'll bite you in the ass down the line.
This scene illustrates to us a couple of things, but the most striking is that Zenkichi is clearly drawing on his own experiences of trying to be the quote-unquote hero. While he too was once idealistic, just like the Phantom Thieves, wanting to bring the bad guys to justice, he has since become bitter and jaded. Even as a member of the Kyoto Police and Public Security, the ones supposedly meant to uphold the law of the land, he was powerless to stop Owada's corruption. This is why he believes that a real leader should take the fall. And his ideations about what's right and what's wrong only led to Akane's life being put in danger. This left Zenkichi's hands tied, and the only course of action was to throw all of his weight and trust into Commissioner Kaburagi, whom he had been reporting all of his interactions with the Phantom Thieves to the whole time, if he ever wanted to see Owada even possibly be brought to justice. And let's be honest, this feeling of helplessness is what led Zenkichi to become the jaded individual he is when we meet him throughout these first couple arcs of the game. If we are to use the well-known Kubler-Ross cycle of grief, which, if you're not familiar with it, is defined by the American Psychological Association as being a hypothetical model originally described in 1969 by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, depicting psychological states, moods, or coping strategies that occur during the dying process or during periods of bereavement, great loss, or trauma. These begin with the denial stage, followed by the anger stage, then bargaining, depression, and acceptance. The model is non-linear in that the stages do not necessarily occur in the given sequence or for a set period of time. Moreover, they can recur and overlap before some degree of psychological and emotional resolution occurs. I believe that this is a good outline to illustrate where an individual is in the grieving process, even though it can oftentimes be a huge oversimplification. But I believe that in the first couple chapters of the game, Zenkichi would definitely be in the depression stage. We can see that while Zenkichi has essentially accepted the fact that his wife is dead, in order to avoid any further loss, he has to stop trying to avenge her. This leads Zenkichi to maintain his feelings of loss, regret, uncertainty, and guilt as he knows that Owada is still out there. And he goes through the motions of putting all of these eggs in Kaburagi's basket so that someday someone more powerful than him can potentially avenge Aoi. And so he remains steadfast in his role as a police officer, even though he hates the system that he is a cog in. However, when Makoto expresses her interest in following in her father's footsteps to become a police officer, we see even further into what he believes about himself and the police force as a whole during this conversation. It's here that we truly see his resentment for being constrained by red tape, superiors, and how the more dangerous or powerful a target is, the less likely anything will happen to them. After playing the game, we know that he is specifically talking about the Owada situation. Well, up to this point in the game, he's done an incredible job of portraying himself as a very competent and self-assured individual, if not a little bit lax and lazy at times. But in reality, his self-esteem or his perception of himself and his abilities is incredibly low. Zenkichi's a man who has been beaten into submission by the very system that's meant to protect people. But at the same time, he will not leave because he holds on to that small glimmer of hope that this broken system may potentially still be able to work under the right leadership. Because without that glimmer of hope, in his mind, what is there left to look towards? And so he's decided that he will follow Officer Kaburagi's orders to the last, even if that makes him just another spineless dog. And in turn, this leads him to focus entirely on his job, because it's difficult for him to face Akane knowing that her mother's killer was not brought to justice. And this is what has created such an immense rift in their relationship, not unlike another father-daughter duo that we've seen in this franchise. But he can only avoid her for so long. And so now we need to talk about Zenkichi's role as a father. Now, Akane and Zenkichi's relationship is, at least in my personal opinion, one of the most compelling aspects of this game by far. When we meet Akane, it doesn't take an empath to realize just from their initial phone call that their relationship is, intense, to say the least. And when they meet up in front of Aoi's grave, Akane takes absolutely no prisoners when verbally attacking her father, throwing the fact that he couldn't catch Owada back in his face, and that she doesn't even see him as a father to her anymore. And while as the player, we know that this eats Zenkichi alive, and we'll soon learn that she really only has half of the information in this situation, it's really hard to blame Akane for taking this stance against her father, because in large part, his behaviors are caused by the defense mechanisms and the parenting style that Zenkichi has adopted since his wife's death. And so I really want to hone in on what it appears to be Zenkichi's defense mechanism of choice over the past 2 years. And as I'm sure you're familiar with, there are a huge amount of different kinds of defense mechanisms that people can develop for a wide variety of reasons and situations. But Zenkichi's is pretty easy to pinpoint as being avoidance, which the APA defines as being the practice or an instance of keeping away from particular situations, environments, individuals, or things because of either A, the anticipated negative consequences of such an encounter, or B, anxious or painful feelings associated with them. Now, psychology brings several theoretical perspectives to the study of avoidance. Its use as a means of coping, its use as a response to fear or shame, its existence as a personality style or predisposition, and its existence as a component in anxiety disorders. While Zenkichi's work naturally takes him away from home, I don't think that this is inherently unintentional at this point. Once the Phantom Thieves get back to Zenkichi's house, we can see this on full display. Whenever Ryuji brings up Akane's mother and what happened, you see him slightly shut down, but begrudgingly answer the question in a very curt and to-the-point fashion. And once Akane, An, Haru, and Makoto go to take a bath, we see him fully avoid the topic when Ryuji tries bringing it back up, instead faking that he's tired and he needs to go to bed. I don't think it's a reach to say that just the sheer act of being around Akane brings up a lot of painful and anxiety-inducing feelings for Zenkichi. He knows when he sees her that she will be unhappy with him, and in reality, he knows that, at least in part, she is justified for this. So what does he do? He avoids these confrontations. It's undeniable that he loves his daughter, but looking at her simply reminds him of the fact that he failed to catch Owada. Being home likely reminds him that he will never see Aoi again, and so he stays away. He avoids his home and his family, just so that he doesn't have to experience the pain he knows he will feel whenever he returns. Though in his own way, he's always trying to make peace with what happened, like when he went out of his way to reconnect the lost boy with his parent. And all of this leads us into talking about how this has manifested into the way Zenkichi parents Akane. And honestly, seeing the interactions between Zenkichi and Akane, it make me a little bit sad that Dr. Maruki isn't canon in Persona 5 Strikers, because I think that they both could use someone to talk things out with, even if he's not the best counselor in the world. And I think his first suggestion would be that they need some snacks. And that brings us to today's sponsor, Tokyo Treat and Sakura Co. Tokyo Treat is a monthly Japanese subscription box full of popular Japanese candy and snacks, such as Japan-exclusive Kit Kats, Ramune, ramen, and many more. And Sakura Co is a monthly Japanese subscription box full of authentic, traditional Japanese snacks from Japan's local artisan snack makers. Both are delivered straight from Japan to your door so that they can share Japanese culture to the world through the medium of snacking, which I think would make Dr. Maruki absolutely jump for joy. So because Tokyo Treat and Sakura Co's boxes come with different themes every single month, I wanted to make sure that my wife Allie was here so that she could dive into the Valentine's Day theme boxes for February. And so, do you want to start with Tokyo Treat or Sakura Co?
Sure thing. Let's start with Tokyo Treat.
Ooh.
So this box comes with this amazing booklet, which not only is beautifully designed, but also contains a bunch of information about what is in the box and also history about Japan.
In Japanese cultures.
Yes! Alright, so right from the top, we already have these Kit Kats, which they just look so good.
I'm thriving for those. And if you can see in the box, this is chock full. Absolutely chock full of goodies.
Alright, dink and sink.
Dink and sink.
That's so good.
The strawberry flavoring is on point. No, that's really, really good. And I'm a sucker for strawberry, and so are you. Anyways.
What a good box to start with. I love strawberry.
Yeah.
Alright, and next, I feel like we should try this Haichu because I recognize that brand name and I know I love them. So
Yes.
this should be delicious. Stop it.
I love Haichu because it's kind of like gum without actually being gum. And as much as I would love to just go on and eat literally everything in the Tokyo Treat box,
Yes.
I think we need to give some love to Sakura Co. because just the packaging alone is absolutely incredible.
Yes. I mean, look at it. It's so pretty.
Like, I feel fancy.
Yes. And then you open it up and just right away, blown away by the art.
And so I just want to dive straight in. And the first thing that's catching my eye is these little heart-shaped candies. They look like chocolates.
Oh, I love that. That's perfect for Valentine's Day.
Perfect.
Oh, they look kind of crunchy. They are crunchy. And a little salty. I love
Yeah.
it.
No, they have little crackers in the middle. Oh no, there's just a lot of flavors happening all at once.
Yeah, well, you got the crunch, you got the salty, you got the sweet.
This is really... And so after looking around the box for a while, we found this littler box.
Yeah.
And inside of it is this gorgeous ceramic plate.
Oh, wow. There's actually a lot of history to this. It looks like in traditional Japanese culture, these patterns are used for weddings as a symbol of good luck. We just got
Ooh,
married.
We did just get married.
Oh, I love that.
And it kind of looks like you're tying the knot. Hey.
Love that.
And if you look at these two boxes, if you just like look at everything combined, and this isn't even everything because we've eaten some of it.
Yeah. Like there's so much here.
There is so much bang for your buck in these boxes, and they're all delicious. And I don't know about for you, but at least for us, these are a lot of snacks that we just never would have tried prior to getting these snack boxes.
Yeah, so if you want to try all of these snacks and also extra snacks on top of this,
Because if you use the code in the link in the description down below, not only can you get these amazing snacks, you would get the same snack boxes that we got with additional snacks while helping us out. And we appreciate that. Always. So, make sure, if you are even remotely interested in Tokyo Treat or the Sakura Co boxes, make sure to get them. Celebrate Valentine's Day the right way. And go to the link in the description down below. But, with all of that out of the way, let's just jump back into talking about Zenkichi and Akane's relationship, because they've had a snack break, we've had a snack break, maybe they can work it out.
yeah.
So when looking at parenting styles, there are 4 key styles that most parents will fall into to some capacity, with these styles being authoritative, uninvolved, permissive, and authoritarian. And while I definitely recommend looking into each of these parenting styles in more depth, I particularly want to focus on the permissive style of parenting, which is illustrated by the graph, and it's based on Zenkichi's demandingness and responsiveness to Akane. While on the surface, I think it could technically be argued that Zenkichi may fall into the uninvolved category, this just doesn't sit right with me. While he may be very avoidant of Akane a lot of the time because of the guilt that consumes him about the loss of Aoi, when he is around her, he truly expresses nothing but warmth and affection towards her, albeit in a very rigid and kind of awkward way, because he feels the need to tiptoe around her. Zenkichi has very few rules for Akane, likely because he just desperately wants to be on her good side so that he can have some semblance of a relationship with his daughter, even though she resents him so incredibly much. With that said though, he's entirely focused on making sure that she is safe and secure. In essence, he moved her away from Tokyo, her home, so that she could be with her grandparents and that she could be looked after when he wasn't around, which is most of the time, essentially leaving their relationship in limbo there. I mean, let's think about it. 2 years ago, yes, Akane lost her mother, Aoi, just like Zenkichi did. But she was also taken away from her home and every support that she had. And her father has become very flighty and avoidant around her. So really, all she has now is her grandparents, who we don't even get to see, so we don't know how involved in her life they actually are. We can even see how out of touch Zenkichi is with his daughter when he asks them to hang out with her in her room, not realizing that they would soon be ambushed by more Phantom Thief merchandise than they ever could have dreamed of. While he knew she was online a lot, he had no idea that she held a genuine online following where she talks with countless people on the internet about her love of the Phantom Thieves. As Makoto points out, Zenkichi's love for Akane is unquestionable, and he wants her to love him the way he loves her. And this is made very clear when he asks Makoto what she thought of her own father before they even reach Aoi's gravesite. And until he can mend this relationship, he will remain stuck in this limbo of wanting to become closer to his daughter while also holding her at arm's length so that he won't unintentionally hurt her again, which in turn is hurting her even more. Now, let's be honest, while Zenkichi is a crucial part of the story for the majority of the game, it's the Kyoto jail that truly permits us to see the man behind the mask. Up to this point, we've seen a very guarded and calculated version of Zenkichi who is acting only in the interest of himself, and at least in his perception, Akane. We know the Phantom Thieves were initially intended to just be a means to an end for him, to allow Kaburagi to tie up the recent uptick of change of heart cases, and it was his role to investigate them and turn them in should there be any evidence of the Phantom Thieves being guilty. However, instead of them simply being the subject of his investigation like they should have been, Zenkichi got a bit too close. He saw the humanity in the Phantom Thieves, and the idea of turning on them gradually became less and less digestible. But he stuck with the plan because he believed in Kaburagi, even if he was reluctant at times. That is until they get back to Kyoto. Once they get back to Kyoto, Kaburagi, who has been coerced by Owada to frame the Phantom Thieves and catch them, springs a surprise attack while they're staying at the bathhouse. And this is when Zenkichi is given a moral decision. Does he stand by the police force and the woman he has thrown all of his weight behind for the past 2 years? Or does he follow his conscience and save the Phantom Thieves, who he knows are innocent? While it may seem pretty clear-cut what he needs to do, since we know that the Phantom Thieves are innocent and that the police force is completely out of line, we have to consider what exactly Zenkichi is risking for them. While in the context of the story, we see that Sae is able to get him out of jail pretty easily, without Sae, by going against Kaburagi and in turn Owada, he was risking never getting the justice his wife deserves. In exchange for the Phantom Thieves' freedom and safety, he was willing to give up his own. He was willing to give up seeing his daughter in order to save the Phantom Thieves for a crime he knew that they were framed for. Because if there's going to be any justice in this world, it's probably not going to actually come from the police force at this point. It's going to come from the Phantom Thieves. While he understands that going against the police force will be hugely detrimental to his life, he cannot bear to allow another abuse of justice go unopposed, while he has the ability to stop it. And so once he is inevitably freed by Sae, this is when we see him face the greatest obstacle of his life, saving his daughter and the Phantom Thieves. No longer is he going to be scared, hiding behind someone else in hopes that things will get better if he just follows orders. Up to this point, yes, he's been the one giving the Phantom Thieves all of the intel that they need so that they can start catching all of the monarchs in the various jails across Japan, but he's been a very passive player on the whole. Yes, he's made the arrest that he needs to, and he's been on site for everything for the most part, but he hasn't been able to truly be a part of the action or the resolution. He's been leaning on the Phantom Thieves just like he's been leaning on Kaburagi for so long. And so he can't be a scared dog anymore, and instead he will fight for what he believes in, even saying that he is willing to risk his life in order to save his daughter. I think that this is an amazing characterization of Erik Erikson's 7th stage of psychosocial development, which looks at the conflict between generativity and stagnation. Now, because typically on this channel we are talking about teens and young adults, just because that tends to be the age of video game and anime protagonists, so I don't know if I've ever actually had the opportunity to do a deep dive on this psychosocial conflict before. But essentially, what it focuses on is the idea that the individual has reached a point where they will either begin feeling it's time to start making their mark on the world, and in turn, making it a better place, or risk feeling disconnected with society as a whole. And up to this point, we are constantly seeing this conflict play out viscerally within Zenkichi. We know that in his heart, he loves his daughter, that he wants to be a good father to her, and that he wants to bring justice to the world through his work as an officer. But the broken system he found himself trapped in has stifled this desire in him, meaning that before he met the Phantom Thieves, and because these conflicts operate along a spectrum, he was leaning more towards this stagnation. The Zenkichi that we met at the beginning, while not self-centered necessarily, had all but given up hope that he could do anything himself to make things better. He had all but isolated himself from Akane and pretty much everyone. But as he spends time with the Phantom Thieves, something started changing in this jaded demeanor. He started to see once again that things can change. He has people who believe in him, and who he in turn also believes in. While when he had first approached them, he had meant to twist their arms purely for his own benefit. Along the way, he began to see the big picture again. He acted as almost a mentor figure to the Phantom Thieves, and this is why he put his future at risk for theirs. But this was only the first step. When he finally got out of jail, he fully understood that by entering the metaverse without a persona, he would be risking his life in order to find some way to hopefully save everyone with Futaba. And while he eventually gets to the thieves and Akane, this is when he was finally able to admit what had happened with the investigation into his wife's death. But there's a distinct moment of hesitation on Zenkichi's part. We can see him almost slip back into his avoidant nature when confronting the shadow of Akane in the jail. You can tell that admitting this is incredibly difficult for him, and he almost goes into that fight or flight nature. But Makoto coaxes him to go on. And once he reveals that all he ever wanted was to protect Akane from Owada, she rejects this, essentially calling him a coward who sacrificed others for his own benefit. Whether it be the Phantom Thieves, Owada's secretary who committed suicide on Owada's behalf, and so many others along the way just to keep Akane safe, and that she does not support that. And while I'm sure we could have an entire conversation about the morality of Zenkichi's actions up to this point, because it's certainly not a black and white issue, what I care more about is what impact these words have on him. This is the moment that prompts him to begin awakening his persona. Finally, the voice of Valjean prompts Zenkichi to look at himself critically, the mistakes he's made, the people he's used and stepped over to ensure his daughter's safety. And while the guilt of this could have very well led him to withdraw back into himself, he instead confronted it and faced it head on, accepting the Phantom Thieves' words and denouncing his past self and his past actions. Yes, it was all well-intentioned just to keep his daughter safe, which, as a parent, it's hard to fault him for that. But still, he understands that his vision was often much too narrow and blurred. He didn't allow himself to see the bigger picture out of the very legitimate fear that he would lose the only family that he had left. And when he finally is firm in his resolve, he hears his persona Valjean say this.
Do you finally see the truth? Do you know the true face of the guilty? They condemn the good to slavery, pretend they do not see their agony. Just as you once did. But another story must begin. Now, show your jailers that you will wear a different chain. I am thou. Thou art I. If you yet seek true justice, we will see it done.
Fine. Seal the contract.
Now, aside from this being one of the best awakenings that we've ever seen, I think it's fascinating that his persona is based on Jean Valjean from Les Mis. And while we could dive deep into the comparison between Jean Valjean and Zenkichi, I think that the game's brief description sums it up quite nicely as to why this just makes sense. After being unfairly imprisoned, Valjean went on to become a champion for the poor and downtrodden, just like Zenkichi would become a ray of hope for the world that has beaten him down time and time again. No longer will he use others for his own selfish gain, and with this awakening, he has let loose his rebellious spirit in order to make sure the world is a better place as a phantom thief. And so, while Akane flees deeper into her jail, Zenkichi and Futaba are able to free the rest of the team, with Zenkichi resolving to call himself Wolf because he's tired of being a trained dog that barks on command. Eventually, when Zenkichi and the Phantom Thieves are able to confront Akane and defeat her fake Phantom Thieves, it's here that Zenkichi Hasegawa, a man who has been dominated by fear for years, is able to confess absolutely everything to his daughter, promising to avenge her mother's death. And when his daughter eventually collapses, his paternal instincts take over and he runs to her, holding her in his arms. And while it's not as though he no longer prioritizes Akane's safety, I don't want to imply that at all, or even that he no longer grieves the death of his wife. He does find the resolve to follow through with what he started so long ago, to ensure that Kanoe and Owada can't hurt anyone anymore. He realizes that things won't change if he doesn't take action. And so instead of maintaining his avoidant behaviors, instead of wallowing in shame and self-doubt and guilt, he instead is ready to tackle everything head on, just like he did to make peace with Akane. But before he does this, he takes the time to care for his daughter and explain everything to her that's happened, thus taking the first steps to breaking free of his permissive and borderline uninvolved parenting style. Instead, moving towards what we can assume will be a much more authoritative style of parenting, which is defined by the APA as a parent or caregiver encouraging a child's autonomy, while still placing certain limitations on behavior. In essence, he wants to be the father he used to be, and someone that not only Akane is proud of, but also someone that she can rely on. And it's through the rest of the story that we really see this development settle in. Zenkichi is eventually reinstated as an officer by Kaburagi, and he works with the Phantom Thieves to bring down Kanoe. And once they are able to defeat him as a monarch, he is able to personally be the one to arrest Kanoe. This is a huge moment for Zenkichi because while we could very well have seen his rage take hold of him when he met the man who had supposedly brainwashed his daughter and was working with Owada, the man who killed his wife, he instead requests that Kanoe atone for his actions and turn over a new leaf. Zenkichi knows better than anyone else that you can't separate the world into good and bad, and while Kanoe has done some terrible things, he's not irredeemable. I think it's fitting that Zenkichi's mask looks like a pinpoint blindfold because once he awakens Valjean, he has both literally and metaphorically begun improving how he sees the world. After claiming ownership of the mistakes that he has made in hopes of protecting his family, I think that he can see that Kanoe, while incredibly misguided, never truly wanted to be an evil person like Owada, nor did he even realize that he wasn't the hero until it was too late. And this is why I love Zenkichi, because while it's great contrasting the Phantom Thieves with their typically adult counterparts, it's nice to see interactions like this, where we can look at two fully grown men who have both made a lot of mistakes in their lives and appreciate just how far Zenkichi has come since the beginning of the game, when compared with Konoe, who's just now realizing his mistakes. And so once Zenkichi and the thieves are eventually able to take down the false god Demiurge, because it's a JRPG, you have to kill a god, it's a rule, and shut down Emma for good, we are able to see him finally accomplish his goal of catching Owada. Zenkichi has quickly become one of the characters in the Persona 5 universe that I personally love the most. It's not often that there's a game like Persona that you can truly delve into the struggles of established adults who are not only fighting their own demons, but also trying to cope with the impact that their choices and decisions have on their children, like we see in the case of Zenkichi. While he's certainly not perfect by the end of the game, I think that we can definitely appreciate how much he's grown. Yes, his emotions still take hold of him from time to time. I think it's hard to deny that his heart is always leading him in the right direction. It's just whether or not he chooses to follow it. And so by the end of the game, he's no longer a chained dog tethered by obligation, but a wolf ready to lead and defend his pack at any cost. But that'll do it for this week's video, guys, and I want to pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts on Zenkichi Hasegawa? And would you be interested in me doing a separate video entirely focused on his daughter, Akane Hasegawa? Leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, why not liking the video, subscribing, and why not even ringing that notification bell so you never miss another upload? And make sure, if you are interested in either Tokyo Treat or Sakurako, to go down to the description and check out those affiliate links, because A, it helps out the channel a lot, and you can get some amazingly delicious treats out of the deal. So make sure to check that out. And as always, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, a fantastic rest of your week, and why not even a fantastic rest of your month, and we will see you in the next video. Later.